Winning Blueprint presents.
In the lab room.
Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. It's Thursday here in the lab room. A couple of issues to iron out, and then we'll talk more about the upcoming schedule for the show as it's starting to become a little bit more clear. So we'll talk about that a lot later in the show. Let's get to some NFL news, though, right away. Percy Harvin. Talked about him over the last couple of weeks, potentially being on the trading block in Minnesota. We've also talked about him potentially wanting Megatron money. You listen to the Minnesota Vikings and you're getting a different feel. However, their GM, Rick Spielman, has come out and said, and he's been pretty adamant about it over the last week or so, Percy Harvin isn't on the trading block. Now, I don't know how much of that I believe, but if he's telling me that, and he's saying it over and over again, and Percy Harvin hasn't been moved yet, I can only go off of what he's telling me, and he's saying that Percy Harvin isn't on the trading block. So if I'm the Vikings, I think that's the best move for them. You can't get equal value for Percy Harvin in another player in the National Football League because what he brings to their team, there's not many guys in the league that can bring the dimensions and add that to their team like Percy Harvin can. And so I don't know if it would be a wise move on the part of the Minnesota Vikings to trade him away. Now, again, if he's disgruntled and he's being unruly and being a cancer in the locker room, then that's a whole separate issue. Then you might need to get rid of him just because he's being counterproductive in your locker room. But if that's not the case, if you're the Minnesota Vikings, I think you just need to stand pat with Percy Harvin because you've seen what this team can be if Adrian Peterson is healthy and he's running the football well. If Christian Ponder can stop having the 8 for 19 for 63 yards, no touchdown, and 2 interception games, you can be a formidable team in the NFC North. You can be a team that contends to make it to the postseason year in and year out if you are able to play some consistent defense and run the football and have some contributions from your special teams. Have a few guys step up out wide at the receiver position. This could be a solid Minnesota Vikings football team, but Percy Harvin is part of that equation. And so it'd be in their best interest to not trade him. But again, you don't know how these things unfold themselves in the long term. Right now, I'm saying that it's the best move for the Vikings to hold on to him. But in the long term, it may be better for them to part ways with him because maybe he's going to be someone that causes problems in that locker room. So I don't know what the future holds for Percy Harvin and the Minnesota Vikings. But as of right now, it looks like Percy Harvin will remain in a Minnesota Vikings uniform, or at least that's per Rick Spielman, the Vikings GM. You look at another story of a team that is talking about possibly making a trade. And we're talking about the Seattle Seahawks now and their quarterback, or backup quarterback in this instance, Matt Flynn. They said that the Seahawks have said, hey, look, we're willing to listen to any offers. Translation, hey, you send me a third-round pick, he's yours. Now, again, in this league, you don't trade first-round picks for unknown commodities. You only trade a first-round selection. And look, it's rare for a team to trade away a first-round draft choice. It's just rare unless you're trading for someone else's first-round draft pick. So if we're swapping picks and you're tossing in a player, that can happen. If you're swapping picks in the first round and you're throwing in a later-round draft pick, that happens. But it's rare for you to get a first-round pick from another ball club for a player. Just doesn't happen that often. So That's out of the discussion for the Seahawks. Second round picks are usually reserved for guys who have the utmost potential. And you've seen enough of them on film to feel like, hey, this guy could be our quarterback of the future. Again, that's not what Matt Flynn is. So he's not worth a first nor a second. If I'm the Seahawks, I want to be reasonable here. Of course, if you're the Seahawks, you want a second round draft choice. If you can get it, you'll take it. But I don't think there's any team out there that would be foolish enough to give up a second round pick like the Seahawks did with Charlie Whitehurst. I don't think anyone's going down that avenue. You haven't seen enough of Matt Flynn, and if Matt Flynn can be upstaged by a young rookie in Russell Wilson and lose the starting job to him, what's to say that he can come on your roster and take over your starting quarterback position? So, to me, the bidding starts at a third-round draft pick if you're a suitor for Matt Flynn. It doesn't go any higher than that. And if you're the Seahawks, you need to be reasonable and know that the bidding probably won't start anywhere higher than that. But look, again, if you're the Seahawks, you're playing with house money here. You don't have to move Matt Flynn if you don't want to. You are paying him an awful lot of money for a guy that probably won't see the field unless Russell Wilson gets hurt. And so, yeah, it would be in your best interest to move him if you can. Because I feel like this Seattle Seahawks offense has evolved past Matt Flynn. I feel like Matt Flynn was someone that this offense would have been tailored around had he gotten a nod. Now that they've started Russell Wilson and they're moving forward with the Russell Wilson project, there's no room for Matt Flynn in my estimation because this offense is so different. They run a lot of read options and different things off of a mobile quarterback, which Matt Flynn is not. And so if you are the Seattle Seahawks, maybe you move Flynn and you start turning your attention to the draft and drafting someone like a E.J. Manuel, a scrambling quarterback that you can come in, have him learn under Russell Wilson, and in case of an emergency, you'll have another quarterback in the mold of a Russell Wilson that can come in and hold it down for a week, 2 weeks, or a 3-week period if Russell Wilson were to turn an ankle, get a concussion, and can't come back for a week or two. You'd have a stopgap. Now, not saying that Matt Flynn can't come in and run the offense. They can tailor it to his strengths and have him come in and be a stopgap until Russell Wilson comes back if he gets injured. But for that type of money that Matt Flynn is being paid, it'd be much better if you could move him somewhere else. Free up that cap space and move on if you are the Seattle Seahawks. And that's why they're listening. Just like the 49ers, just like a lot of these teams with extra quarterbacks on their roster because they made the switch to someone else, teams are listening. The 49ers are listening to Alex Smith trade talks. Now, look, that's not to say they're going to move him, but they're listening. And if the deal is one that you can't pass up, trust me, these teams will pull the trigger on these deals. So we'll see what the Seahawks do with Matt Flynn moving forward. But again, when you're paying someone as much money as Matt Flynn is being paid, you don't want him sitting and rotting on your bench. You much rather trade him away, free up that cap space, and do something else with it than just let it sit there and rot away on your bench. So Matt Flynn was a guy that the Seahawks got in free agency a season ago. And that was sort of a cautionary tale of how free agency can go wrong. But that's on a smaller scale. The Eagles, however, getting Nnamdi Asomugha in free agency 2 seasons ago, that's an even bigger tale. An even bigger cautionary tale of how free agency can go terribly wrong. And now the Eagles are talking about potentially having to part ways with Nnamdi Asomugha. And look, he has underachieved so badly in Philadelphia. He has underperformed that contract so badly that the Eagles are contemplating letting him walk away and cutting ties with him and moving on. That probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for the Philadelphia Eagles. Just depends on how big that cap hit will be for cutting ties with Nnamdi Asomugha. And so you have to weigh that and think about, is it worth cutting him loose if we still have to pay him X amount of dollars and his salary for this season would have been X amount of dollars? Let's say his salary for the 2013 season is $5.2 million. and cutting him, you would still have to pay him 3.8. I don't know if that $1.4 million is enough for you to cut him loose, that you would be saving under the cap by getting rid of him. I don't know if you cutting him loose would yield you that much more players that you would be able to sign and give you that kind of flexibility under the cap. I don't know if him not being on your roster anymore is worth having $1.4 million freed up under the cap. Not sure. So that's the kind of thing the Eagles have to think about. Will he be better in 2013? That's another thing the Eagles will have to think about. New staff, new defensive coordinator, all new changes in Philadelphia means maybe you get a new and invigorated Nnamdi Asomugha. And I'll tell you what, the best days of Nnamdi Asomugha are behind us. Those days were spent in Oakland where no one was paying attention. So his best days, his Pro Bowl days, his All-Pro days are probably long gone. And the Eagles asked him to come over here and do some things that, frankly, he just wasn't really adept at doing. He wasn't a guy that played a lot of zone coverage. And even when he played press man coverage, it's a different animal out here in the NFC versus being in the AFC when no one's watching. Teams aren't afraid to take shots at you. And when you play in a division where quarterbacks are really good, like a Eli Manning, like a Tony Romo, now the Washington Redskins have Robert Griffin III, you can be exposed versus playing in a division with the Denver Broncos, Kansas City Chiefs, and San Diego Chargers where it's not all that bad. I mean, the only quarterback they had in that division for years was Phillip Rivers, and Phillip Rivers at times could be had. And so it's a vast difference. And now Nnamdi Asomugha finds himself potentially having to look for work. We'll see what the Eagles decide to do. Tell you what, though, if Nnamdi Asomugha hits the street, there will be plenty of suitors for his services. Now, he won't be paid nearly as much as he was with the Eagles, but someone will pay him a nice amount of money to come and play cornerback for their club. And he can still play football. It's just about the system. If you get him in the right system, you ask him to do certain things, I think he'll be okay. I just think the Eagles had him doing too many things. See, in Oakland, he just did one thing. Man-to-man press coverage. That was it. Wasn't a lot of zone. Wasn't a lot of things going on. Wasn't a lot of different schemes. It was zero coverage or cover one, and it was man-to-man coverage all day in Oakland. And so he didn't have to think. He didn't have to think about other things. He didn't have to think about zone coverage. Where am I supposed to be? Am I supposed to have the deep third? Am I supposed to be dropping into the flats? None of that. It was just man-to-man. I have this guy. I'm going to stay in front of him all game long. So maybe if he gets in the right system, he'll be okay. But I don't know if the Eagles will cut ties with him or not. I don't know if that's the best decision for the Eagles to make. Because, yeah, he's underperformed that contract. And, yes, you are paying him a lot of money. But at the end of the day, can you do better than Nnamdi Asomugha if you are the Philadelphia Eagles? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Can you do better for a lot less? Maybe you can. And if so, then maybe that is the direction you need to go in, releasing Nnamdi Asomugha. We'll see. Also, speaking of people being released or potentially being free agents, the Chicago Bears haven't decided yet what they'll do with Brian Urlacher. His deal is up, and come March the 13th, he will be a free agent. And not that there will be many teams beating down the door of Brian Urlacher if March 13th comes and he's still not signed back with the Bears. But that's an interesting dynamic. A guy that's been the face of a franchise for over a decade. He's getting up there in age. He's constantly oft hurt. And now his contract is up. New management has taken over in Chicago. A new head coach. And all of a sudden now, you're not sure if Brian Urlacher is welcome in Chicago anymore. Now, of course, the Bears will want to work something out with Urlacher as he is a Chicago Bear essentially for life. But if Urlacher isn't reasonable, I don't think the Bears will have him back. Now, if Urlacher realizes that, yeah, my knees aren't what they used to be, I'm often injured, and my play has diminished over the last 3 seasons greatly, maybe he'll realize, okay, this is what my worth is to this team. This is what I'm looking for. And if it's reasonable, I don't see why the Bears won't bring him back. Just as an emotional leader, if nothing else. He can still be productive on the field. But Urlacher is the Chicago Bears. Has been and will continue to be until he retires. But maybe that time might be a lot sooner than we all thought. Tresman has already come out and said, look, we haven't even explored re-signing Brian Urlacher to this point. And I'm not sure if they're really even considering it right now. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. There's the combine, there's free agency. There's a lot of things to comb over if you're a new head coach, as Mark Tresman is. But Brian Urlacher has been the face of the Chicago Bears franchise for a while now. And so he's not something that you just put off to the side and say, hey, we'll get to that when I get a chance. That's not what you do to Brian Urlacher. Okay? It's not like we're talking about some special teams guy for the Chicago Bears. We're not talking about Nick Roach. We're not talking about some random linebacker that's been with the Bears for 3 seasons and all of it has been spent on the special teams unit. We're talking about a guy that's been the face of this franchise for the last decade and has been a guy that when all else fails, you can turn to Brian Urlacher and say, hey, we need you to get it done. And he's been producing for this Chicago Bears team for a very long time. So this isn't something you just put on the back burner and say, hey, just wait over there. We'll have an assistant get to you when I get some time, and then we'll talk about it. This is something that you need to get out of the way, figure out what you're going to do. So if, in fact, he won't be back, you can make the necessary adjustments and move forward. So it would be a pretty intriguing offseason for the Bears and really anxious to see what they decide to do with Brian Urlacher. More free agency talk as 2 running backs that I feel like should be back on their respective teams, Reggie Bush and DeAngelo Williams. Seemed like just a month ago, even a week ago, that these 2 wouldn't be back on their respective teams, the Miami Dolphins and the Carolina Panthers. But all of a sudden, I'm hearing that these 2 running backs may, in fact, be back with their former teams. Now, in the case of Reggie Bush, I don't understand the logic here. Why the Dolphins feel like Lamar Miller is the running back of the future. I haven't seen anything from Lamar Miller that tells me, hey, we need to get rid of Reggie Bush and put Lamar Miller in the game pronto. Haven't seen anything. Haven't seen the explosiveness that we saw at the University of Miami from Lamar Miller in the NFL. Haven't really seen anything that lends me to believe that he's going to be an exceptional back in the National Football League. Haven't seen any of those things. Now, again, I'm not at practice. I don't watch Lamar Miller in drills, in practice. I don't see him on a daily basis. So maybe he is showing the coaches what they need to see to think that they can move on from Reggie Bush. But I tell you one thing, Reggie Bush is a known commodity in the league. Now, Reggie Bush isn't going to get you 1,500 rushing yards every season. But Reggie Bush is a guy that can really do a lot of things for your team. If you need him in a pinch, he can do some special teams for you. He's a guy that can run the football for you out of the backfield. The Dolphins, they know that all too well. He went over 1,000 yards and so. They know what Reggie Bush can do running the football. And we all know what Reggie Bush can do out of the backfield as a pass-catching threat. So I just feel like they need to draw up more plays for Reggie Bush. I didn't think they got him the football enough. I thought that they were very vanilla in their schemes offensively. And if you're going to have a guy like Reggie Bush who's a jack of all trades, you need to create ways to get him the football. Much like New Orleans does with Darren Sproles, you need to find ways, invent ways, create ways to get Reggie Bush the football like New Orleans did with him when he was in that system with Sean Payton. Find ways to get Reggie Bush the football. He's a dynamic player that when he's in space is one of the most dangerous and explosive athletes in the National Football League. But we didn't get to see that in Miami last season because they really didn't go out of their way to get him the football. And so I don't know what they're thinking. And look, again, I'm not at practice, but I tell you what, on a team that's really void of a lot of talent, why would you be even entertaining letting Reggie Bush go unless Reggie Bush wants an astronomical amount of money and you're not willing to pay it? Then I can understand your angle. But to just say, hey, we don't even want to talk to you. We're getting rid of Reggie Bush. We're getting out of the Reggie Bush game, which is what it seemed like early on in the process, didn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, on the other hand, DeAngelo Williams, to me, makes no sense from the Carolina Panthers standpoint because he's your best running back. And at some point in the season, they decided that Jonathan Stewart was their best back, and they were going to start him. That was a head scratcher for me. I was wondering what's going on. What is Rob Chizzinski and that offense doing? Because DeAngelo Williams is a game changer. When he started playing at the end of the season, it's no wonder that the Panthers won their last 4 games of the season, saving their head coach Ron Rivera's job. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that DeAngelo Williams was on the field and he was getting the football and he was being ultra productive, which is what he usually does when he's not injured. And so I couldn't understand for the life of me why they decided that he wasn't an important enough member of this team to not get the football. It was baffling. And then as soon as he's entered into the game, next thing you know, it's a 50-yard touchdown run or there's a 62-yard screen pass to the house, and you're saying, why hasn't this guy touched the football more? It just doesn't make sense to me. And so if you are the Panthers, I think it's a no-brainer. And their GM, Gettleman, has come in and said, look, I don't see why he won't be back with this team in 2013 and moving forward, which is the attitude they should have. But again, that wasn't the message that I was getting early on in the offseason. But again, Gettleman wasn't the GM early on in the offseason. So things have changed, and maybe, just maybe, DeAngelo Williams will be back in Carolina. And if he is, that's a good thing for the Carolina Panthers fan base because he is a very dynamic player, and I love what he brings to their offense. So that's a touchdown. Go ahead, throw it up. Want to tack on this quick extra point. Now, we talked yesterday about upcoming programming on this very show, and the most immediate one will be 5 minutes or less. It's in the workings right now. I'm in the process of putting the final touches on it. And so this will either be coming your way tomorrow or Monday. We'll see which one it is. If it's not Friday, it'll definitely be Monday. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And as I said yesterday, we'll do that, and then we'll transition into free agency because that's looming here shortly. That's right around the corner. Before you know it, it'll be March. Then it'll be March 13th at 4 o'clock p.m. It'll be free agency time. Free agency frenzy is what it'll be. And so we'll chronicle all of that again. Here in the lab room, we're going to stay in tune with everything that's going on in the National Football League. So whether it's combine talk, free agency talk, draft talk, we'll be doing it all here. So stay tuned in the lab room. I thank you for joining me today here in the lab room on this Thursday edition. There's many ways to contact or view the show. As always, there's Facebook. In the lab room is the Facebook page. Like it. There's Twitter. At In the Lab Room is the Twitter handle. Follow me on Twitter. There is the YouTube page. Louis T is the page. Please subscribe. If you like the videos and you're a frequent viewer and you have not done so, please subscribe to the page, like the videos. I thank you guys for your support. Without you, there's no me. And so I really appreciate all of you guys out there who are faithful viewers who are always tuning in and giving me feedback. I love talking to each and every one of you. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and continue to view the show as we are doing bigger and better things here in the lab room. So I want to thank you guys so very much. I am very appreciative of every single one of you. And if you contact me through any one of those social media outlets, then it'll come directly to the inbox. If you want to bypass all of that, simply it's in the lab room at gmail.com. That is the inbox. And so I thank you for joining me here today on this program. Want to see you back here, same time, same place. And as always, take care. Have a good one. I want to see you back here tomorrow. And hopefully we'll be doing some 5-minute or less segments. See you then. Have a good one.